Help me reach 1,000 subscribes. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every comment. Thanks. James never walked into his relationship with Elizabeth expecting perfection. He wasn't chasing constant passion or movie-style romance. He believed in consistency, in showing up, in choosing the same person even on boring days. That's how love lasted, or so he thought. At 39, James had learned that fireworks fade, but commitment shouldn't. Elizabeth seemed to believe that once too. When they met, she admired his calm, his reliability, the way he listened instead of performing. She told him he made her feel safe. He took that seriously, maybe too seriously. For the first few years, their life felt balanced. Not loud, not chaotic, just solid. They cooked together, planned modest trips, laughed at inside jokes no one else would understand. James worked long hours, but always came home. Elizabeth built her career steadily, proud of her independence. They were partners. Or at least James believed they were. Somewhere along the way, without an argument or a clear moment to point at, something shifted. Elizabeth began pulling away in small, deniable ways. Conversations shortened. Eye contact faded. Her phone became more interesting than his presence. James noticed, but didn't confront it right away. He told himself relationships go through seasons. He adjusted instead. He tried harder. He planned dinners, asked questions, offered space when she seemed distant, when she stopped reaching for him at night. He told himself she was tired, when affection turned mechanical. He told himself love didn't always look the same. He was patient, because patience felt like maturity. If this story already feels familiar, hit the like button so it reaches people who might be living the same silence. Elizabeth never complained. That was the confusing part. No fights, no accusations, no demands. Just absence. James felt himself shrinking inside his own home, becoming careful, quieter, more invisible. He began measuring his words, his gestures, even his breathing, as if existing too loudly might annoy her. Still, he stayed. He believed loyalty meant endurance. If you've ever stayed longer than you should have out of loyalty, share that thought in the comments. The breaking point didn't arrive with drama. It came on an ordinary evening. Elizabeth was scrolling through her phone while James sat nearby, saying nothing. After a long silence, he asked calmly if something was wrong. She didn't look up. She didn't hesitate. She said one sentence, flat and precise, as if reading a line she'd rehearsed. I don't feel anything anymore. No anger, no apology, just a fact, delivered without weight. That sentence didn't hurt because it was cruel. It hurt because it was final. James didn't argue. He didn't ask for explanations. He simply nodded, as if acknowledging something he'd known, but refused to name. In that moment, he understood he had been alone for a long time. Type the word clarity in the comments if you know how one sentence can change everything. What Elizabeth didn't realize was that something else changed too. Not immediately, not dramatically, but quietly. James stopped trying. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. He slept, ate, worked, and spoke less. He moved through the house like a guest who knew his stay was temporary. Elizabeth noticed the distance, but misread it as acceptance. She thought silence meant compliance. If you think emotional distance is more dangerous than arguments, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. James wasn't planning an exit. He wasn't plotting revenge. He was simply processing the truth that love, without presence, is just habit. He began to imagine a life where he wasn't constantly proving his worth. That idea scared him, but also felt light. Elizabeth continued as before, comfortable in her detachment, unaware that her certainty had already cost her something. Before you move on, comment below. When someone stops choosing you, is walking away strength or failure? By the end of that week, James had made a decision, though he hadn't spoken it aloud yet. He understood now that love doesn't disappear loudly. Sometimes it fades quietly, leaving one person holding a ghost. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. James didn't announce his decision to Elizabeth. He didn't owe her a speech, and he knew any explanation would only invite negotiation. Instead, he focused on preparing himself quietly. He arranged his finances, sorted through personal documents, and began spending longer hours away from home, not to punish her, but to remind himself that his world extended beyond that quiet house. Elizabeth noticed his absence, but assumed it was temporary. Another phase he would eventually explain away like all the others. The moment she realized something was different came one evening when she asked, casually, where he had been. James answered without emotion, telling her he'd been thinking. That was all. No reassurance followed. No attempt to soften the moment. The air between them felt unfamiliar, heavier than before. For the first time in months, Elizabeth seemed unsettled. She asked if something was wrong. James looked at her, really looked at her, and understood how strange it was that she only felt concerned once his attention was gone. He didn't raise his voice when he finally spoke. He told her he was leaving, not for the night, not to cool off, leaving for good. Elizabeth laughed at first, assuming it was a bluff. When she realized he was serious, her tone shifted. She asked questions she hadn't asked in years. She wanted reasons she already knew. James answered honestly, but briefly. He told her that love cannot survive indifference, and that her one sentence had simply confirmed what her actions had been saying for a long time. Elizabeth tried to reframe the past, to suggest they could work on things, to promise effort. James listened, but something in him had settled. He understood now that love offered only when loss is imminent isn't love, it's fear. He packed what he needed, slowly, deliberately. There were no tears from him, only a quiet resolve. Elizabeth watched, stunned, as the man she'd grown used to overlooking finally chose himself. The days that followed were strange. James moved into a small apartment and felt lighter than he expected. The loneliness he feared didn't arrive the way it had in his marriage. Instead, there was calm. Elizabeth called, texted, apologized, and questioned herself out loud. But James kept his distance, not out of anger, but because clarity once gained is difficult to surrender. He wished her well without offering hope. That boundary mattered more than closure. Months later, James reflected on how close he'd come to losing himself entirely. He understood now that being patient with neglect isn't noble, it's destructive. Relationships don't end only because of betrayal or cruelty. Sometimes they end because one person stops showing up and the other finally stops pretending that's enough. Elizabeth had not been evil. She had simply been done long before she admitted it, and James had been too loyal to accept it sooner. He didn't hate her. He didn't regret the years they shared. But he learned something essential. Love requires participation, not endurance. When someone turns away from you emotionally, staying doesn't make you stronger, it makes you smaller. Walking away restored parts of him he hadn't realized were missing. His life wasn't louder or flashier afterward, but it was honest, and that mattered more. Elizabeth moved on eventually, telling friends the relationship had simply run its course. James never corrected her. He didn't need to. He knew the truth, and that truth shaped how he lived from then on. He promised himself he would never again accept silence in place of affection or confusion in place of clarity. And he knew that the one sentence that changed everything had also saved him. If this story made you reflect on your own relationships, like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories that explore the quiet moments where real decisions are made.